So yeah, today's presentation should, as I said, I think before, it should give an overview of project management as a use case, right, for artificial intelligence, and basically answer the question of if and how AI could be useful for the project management practice. So is AI really a game changer for the delivery of projects and actually disrupting and revolutionizing this domain as it does with many other business areas, as we know? But before we get into this, let me first give you a bit of more information about myself, so you know so that you know where I'm coming from and what my background is in the context of project management. So I do have almost 25 years of experience in projects, mainly within the financial services industry, of which I have about 12 years of experience as a project and program manager. So my expertise is in IT projects, so technology, running transformation projects, globally, internationally. I collected a few industry leading certifications, mainly to advance my skills and knowledge, which, along with my experience then as a project manager, helped me actually to identify certain gaps, which is basically what we are going to talk about today. So the first question really is how we even come to AI for to use in project management. I mean, why would we actually need AI in project management in the first place? What is it actually that AI should solve for us exactly? And actually, you know, AI is often just being thrown into any discussion, you know, when it comes to change and innovation. We are very quick with that, and because, you know, it sounds innovative, disruptive, modern, it's a fancy thing, right? But often the concept of AI is actually misunderstood. And in many cases, you actually need something else. So is this maybe the same when it comes to project management? So for this, let's look at first at a proper definition of artificial intelligence, and that's provided here by Gartner in this case, right? So AI applies techniques to interpret events, support and automate decisions, and take actions. So it is important to recognize the terms of interpretation, support, automation, and actions. In order to interpret events, now AI needs to process information or data and understand it actually. And to understand it, you often need more than just one piece of information. And you know, AI can support and automate decisions, meaning that some decisions can be taken autonomously, while others are actually supported only by, but not really taken by an AI algorithm, for example.
Marcus, just a quick moment. Can you maybe tweak the mic? Because it seems there's a little bit of distortion. Just as a point.
Can you hear me better right now?
No, it seems to be the same for me.
Okay. So I'm not really audible, or is there a problem?
Break every once in a while, but I mean, it's not that bad. I still hear you. It's just, I thought maybe, you know, you can tweak it or something. If not, it's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I hope that works. Okay.
Okay.
No distortion. Okay, good. Maybe it's just for you, Nicholas. But let me go on here. So yeah, what I was saying is the one key point actually that I want to really point out here is AI's capability to support and automate decisions, right? So why is that actually important to us? Because project management is driven by decisions at the end. And especially when it comes to decision making, I think that is basically the core of project management. So to successfully deliver a project, you know, project managers or any other decision-making body in projects, you know, like steering committees and so forth, and need to make sure that the right decisions actually are being made. So getting it right is actually, in fact, an art, as it states here. Since we rely on information and we rely on the right interpretation of information and also the right skill to determine the consequences of decisions. So it's therefore very critical for project outcomes. And data and information, therefore, it plays also a very important role in project management at the end to ensure that we are making good and actually the right decisions. So it is really important in this whole context to review how good our decision-making ability actually is today in projects. And here's an example where apparently really bad decisions have been taken. Some are probably familiar with you. So this is something from actually started in 2015 when the Spanish bank, Banco Sabadell, they bought the UK bank, TSB, for I think about 1.7 billion British pounds. And consequently, they initiated a plan to actually merge the IT system, so onboard basically the customer base from TSB and onboard them into their IT system. So work on this started in 2016, and 2 years later, then in 2018, when apparently everything's supposed to be ready for go live or to migrate. So in 2018, I think about 5.4 million client accounts, they were migrated into the new system. Only that then, only after hours after the migration, after that happened, massive problems started to occur. And actually close to 2 million TSB clients who use internet and mobile banking, they were locked out of the system and they could not access their accounts anymore. There were incorrect payments made, credit cards blocked, funds randomly shuffled across accounts. So it was certainly a massive disaster. So obviously, huge losses for the bank. As you can see here, 330 million British pounds, significant. And of course, many angry customers at the end, having canceled their accounts. So that's one example, but there's another one which especially our participants from Germany are well familiar with. That's an epic project failure, I would say, which most of you have read about. So that's the construction of the new international airport in Berlin. So the project started here in 2006 and it was planned to get delivered in 2011, so 5-year delivery timeline. I think the delivery date got changed about 10 times or so. So just a couple of months or even only weeks before the planned delivery date in some cases, right? So significant turbulence basically in that project. The costs exploded. At some point, I remember there were discussions if they should not start all over instead of fixing the existing problems. So a lot of issues. The airport, as you probably know, just got finally delivered just a few weeks back. But with 9 years of delay and a cost overrun of close to 100%, I think we safely can say that that was an epic project failure. So those were 2 examples, and obviously some extreme examples, right, where projects dramatically failed. And these are obviously more prominent examples. But unfortunately, those are really not just some outliers. And here you see a chart that shows statistics since 1994 for IT projects specifically, as per in this case, a Standish group that collected this over the years. They ran statistics for about 40,000 IT projects. So I think it is reasonably representative. And as you can see, as per those statistics, actually the best run we ever had in IT projects, in IT project delivery, that was in 2013 when 41% of IT projects, they were successfully delivered. And that means the lowest failure rate we ever had, and failure means here a project either got canceled or it was challenged, meaning it did not meet all the success criteria. So the lowest project failure rate we ever had in a year, that was 59%. And that is obviously very shocking. And especially for me, who has a background in IT project management, that hurts, obviously. But unfortunately, IT projects are really not the exception here. The University of Oxford, they conducted a research in 2015, which indicates that we see way too many project failures across various industries, actually. And although those numbers here specifically refer to the cost targets of projects only, I mean, those numbers are, again, really shocking, right? I mean, how can it be that not one single Olympic Games event project gets delivered on budget? I mean, those events are new, obviously, right? So shouldn't we know good enough by now how to successfully deliver such projects, meaning also on budget? And if you think about it, I mean, there were so many updates to project management guidelines, you know, the PMBOK from PMI and other guidelines from Association for Project Management, the UK, for example. And we got agile methodology introduced, which obviously also focuses on technology projects specifically, right? And also aim to improve project success rates. But we do not see real improvement at the end. But then obviously need to understand the root cause for this ongoing problem and those low project success rates. So why do projects really fail? And project failures are ultimately based on wrong decisions. So when you look at the reasons that were given here in a survey conducted by PMI in 2018, it was, you find numerous issues that were triggered by actually wrong decisions. So for example, inaccurate task time estimates is listed here as a reason. I mean, have we been too optimistic with our estimates and not considered really any critical dependencies, for example, or inaccurate requirements gathering I see here? Did we hire a business analyst, right, who simply is not suitable maybe for this particular project, maybe overall a good BA or business analyst, but not suitable for this particular project? So we basically can link most of the provided reasons to wrong decisions. And that means ultimately, or what we see here is that these are actually symptoms of a much broader issue that we are facing today in project management. So those reasons are basically the consequence from something more fundamental and something deeply wrong in how we actually run and manage projects. So we have to get to the root cause of the problem to get things ultimately under control. So talking about the root cause, one significant factor, of course, is the human bias. And there are numerous cognitive biases. I'm not going through this right now in detail, but that makes obviously part of our human nature and it makes our view very subjective. And you know, cognitive biases are like an optical illusion, and that's one here that's shown here. So you are maybe familiar with this one, which is called checker shadow illusion. And for the ones who aren't, the question is if the squares A and B have the same color or if those colors are actually different, so those gray shades. So at first sight, all of us would probably say that those have different colors. I still would say that, but the correct answer is that they actually have the same color. So cognitive biases have a big impact on decision-making in projects, and project decisions today are mainly driven by intuition, by experience, but also often also by human biases. So take the RAG status of a project, for example, red, amber, green, right? When you report your project status. I mean, there's so many different definitions out there, what those colors actually mean. I mean, try to Google it yourself and see how many different definitions you will find. And even if you have defined the RAG definitions upfront for any of your projects, and I mean, obviously that's best practice, and I'm sure you usually do that, you still get into management meetings, like, steering committee meetings, for example, and you hear things like, yeah, I think the product is rather red and it's not amber, or maybe it's, I don't know, orange, or the product is green, trending amber, something like this. So it's almost ridiculous how many different views and flavors could exist for a project status. And this ultimately is also a result from human biases. Another root cause is what we generally refer to as big data, right? And I think it's even a very significant factor or root cause, let's say, and it's actually increasing. So because it's also an increasing amount of information that we have to deal with, and that information plays a role for projects, and actually it should be processed and taken into account for the proper management of a project. But no, with our current means, we are simply not able to cope with this flood of information and projects. So it's going definitely way beyond our human capabilities. And this constant increase of information causes then obviously a lot of challenges for organizations, as you know, a lot of time is spent, as you can see, a lot of time is spent to collect, prepare, and analyze data. So the estimate here is that of approximately 80% of time analysts are spending on such activities. And this costs a lot of money and effort. Well, I mean, at the same time, we're not even able to actually gather or collect all information, all relevant information. And the result is then that a lot of data is not even being leveraged, and it's not going into decision-making processes. And as it states here, no, I mean, less than 50% of structured data is being used in decision-making. So it means that there remains a high uncertainty, which is, if you think about this, it's absurd, because you know, with so much data out there, we actually should be able to decrease the level of uncertainty in projects and get to more reliable decisions. So therefore, I think our decision-making ability has been compromised already, right? It's definitely already kind of outruled by this sheer endless amount of data. So let's look at the role of data and its resulting information that goes into projects. And we can differentiate here between the different categories of nouns and unknowns. That means, you know, information that we can see or are aware of, and other information that is actually rather hidden to us. And imagine here really this iceberg, right? Or better, actually imagine you are sitting on a boat in the ocean. So what is above the surface of the sea, such as, you know, your own boat or maybe other boats around you, this is obviously something that we can clearly see. It can be categorized here as nouns, because we have very clear view on this, right? And project terminologies, those are things such as, you know, dependencies, issues, resources, or risks for which we have a good grasp regarding their probabilities. And then there are things that are slightly obscure to us, right? So when you look into the water, you may see, fishes or anything that is swimming close to the surface. So you can identify such things, but they are, however, a bit obscure, right? And it's fuzzy because it's in the water. It becomes fuzzier, so the deeper it goes. So mapping this again to project language. So this could be categorized as project risks for which we do not really have a good view on its probability. So we do not have enough data or information to fully quantify such risks. And those are then basically the noun unknowns. And both the noun nouns and the noun unknowns, they represent basically project data that are leveraged and used in today's projects. They go into project plans, risk management plans, and resource management plans, and so forth, right? But then we know that there's actually something deeper into the ocean in this case, right? So when we look into the water after certain depths, we cannot identify things anymore. We know that there's something more, but we cannot really capture this. So we know there's something, but we don't know what it is exactly. It means we do not have the ability to look that deep into the ocean with the bare eye. And in project management, we are not using today really proper tools to go that deep to discover such unknown nouns, right, in this case. We will have actually additional risks down there, or rather uncertainties, but we're not capturing such information. No, it's not being used in projects usually. And then if you go even further down, so the last element basically are the unknown unknowns. So taking that example again from this ocean, we have the human ability to identify objects to a certain depths of the ocean, as I've mentioned. But beyond that, we need tools to assist us so that we can identify these unknown nouns first. But the unknown unknowns, so very deep down, we would actually need more advanced tools. So it requires advanced intelligence to identify such data. And such hidden data is basically unstructured data that is not being processed for use in business context. And in project management, we therefore can say that, this unleveraged project data, so these unknown unknowns, but also the unknown knowns are actually what we call like dark data, and it's not being processed in project management or for project management purposes. And those areas actually is where we usually have a lot of project data sitting in. And that actually project data that actually could be of value for projects or future projects. So a lot of historical project information, including lessons learned, for example, or information on tasks and their estimates, right, from previous projects, as well as previous decisions taken, right? All this could be, I mean, there could be similarities in tasks and activities for a present project and could be useful for today's and future projects. And I like to take that example of lessons learned, actually. I mean, I have seen this very often where people run a lessons learned session, or let's say an agile retrospective as well, right? So we scribble things on post-it notes, have some discussion about what went bad, what went okay. We tap ourselves maybe on the shoulders, maybe take a picture of all this with our mobile phone, and then I'm happy to say, okay, we did a wash-up of our project and all will be better in the future. Does it sound familiar in some cases? I mean, I'm not saying that this is everywhere the case, but it is, it exists, right, this way. But, you know, where is all this information that has been discussed? You know, at best, such information will be then maybe stored in some folder on SharePoint, for example, or something which is accessible only by one particular project team. But it's not shared with other projects, which potentially they could benefit from. So such data becomes basically an unknown known, and it is hidden. It's hidden to the you know, outside of that particular project. And we have similar problems with other historical project information, you know, such as risk information, you know, any risk strategies that we elaborated before and have used, or any particular stakeholder information, which would you know, facilitate to put together our stakeholder map in a current project. Project schedule information, you know, based on estimates previously done and actual duration of tasks from previous projects could be all useful. So all of this is valuable information for us to ensure basically that we're not repeating planning shortfalls from the past or mistakes from the past, but actually improve on our project delivery. Because with this information, also our decisions in projects will become more reliable at the end and more accurate, you know, as decision making is becoming then data informed. So ask yourself why we are making so many bad decisions at the end in projects, and that's what it comes down to. I mean, if we look at the typical steps in a decision making process, we need to realize that every step is ultimately impacted by the factors of human bias, as well as the lack of sufficient information. You know, in fact, I mean, already when we identify a problem for which we need to find ultimately a solution, we often have already, at that point, already limited information available, and we may not be able to grasp the full scope of a problem. And as a consequence, we often then, you know, collect and analyze only a subset of data and then mix that together with human biases, and also we miss some analytical tools maybe, then we are further handicapped towards a reasonable solution at the end. And then at the end, when we get to the actual decision making, you know, additional factors for uncertainty kick in, you know, such as gut feeling or political motivations from the decision maker or other stakeholders. And then once we implement, let's say, a bad decision at the end, then we might be even hesitant to switch to an alternative solution because we have not enough information that gives us enough confidence at the end that an alternative could be actually better or is better. So a lot of data at the end is not being used and it does not flow into the decision-making process. And as a result, we are truly handicapped and we make bad decisions in projects, which lead then ultimately to project failures. So while human judgment and intuition is certainly an important element in project management. It is heavily constrained by cognitive biases, individual interests, and also political motivations, right? And in addition, the information that we gather for insights for decision-making in projects, that's actually insufficient. So a lot of information that is relevant is missing and hidden to us. Or we're not capable to properly read and interpret the data. It could also happen, which is then actually also a consequence from the overload of information. And project management training and experience is simply not enough anymore, as we have to deal with data and information. And what is missing here is the education to properly process and consume data for project management purposes. So ultimately, we have a lot of constraints which basically block us from delivering projects successfully. It leads ultimately to an increase of project failures. So those issues are definitely not new, right? I mean, a lot has been written about cognitive biases. I'm sure you have read that as well as that information overload. I mean, big data is all over the place. And that especially, I mean, that especially impacts decision-making capabilities, that big data element, right? But, you know, so far we have actually struggled to properly address those shortcomings, especially in projects. And it's becoming more and more challenging because of that increasing amount of information, as I said. So how can artificial intelligence help here? That's obviously the burning question. So what we need to do is we need to significantly reduce the risk and uncertainty in projects, right? And get those much better under control. And that means that we need to get the much better hold of that growing amount of information and ultimately make data a priority. And again, right, when it comes to risk and uncertainty, we can take this model of the iceberg again with the various nouns and unknowns, as those are actually all categories of risks and uncertainties. And obviously we know that risks and uncertainties need to be properly managed to ensure project success. And that the decision maker at the end, when it comes to various decisions in projects, is actually able to have the highest possible confidence when assessing these different threats and opportunities and place them on that scale between certainty and impossibility. So in other words, we need to have a good understanding or better understanding, let's say, of the probability of a risk or uncertainty to materialize. So we know that the category of noun nouns contains risk for which we have a relatively good understanding of the chances, as we have seen before. For the noun unknowns, we are already lacking reliable data and information, so it limits us. We know that as well. So here we rely actually today mainly on experience and often also on intuition when making an assessment. So in this case, we should actually rather leverage statistical data about certain similar events in the past. And this way we can actually make an assessment regarding the probability for a certain event to happen, or let's say a better assessment. And the unknown known, as we know, is a state of uncertainty. And remember, this is available but not collected data, as shown before. So in this case, we either were not capable to fetch the information because of our own human limitations, or any of those threats or opportunities that fall into this category, they were identified by others, by other teams, but that information has not really been shared with us or the decision maker in this case here. And this is usually happening when we operate in data silos, and this happens often in larger organizations. And then the unknown is where this hidden and unstructured information lies. So nothing, I mean, it has not been identified and no information is basically available. So it means here is basically the location where black swans, that means those risks that are high impact, but fully unknown to us, that's where they are placed. But we have to be careful. I mean, there are often different opinions about what a black swan actually is, and if it really is something that we are we should not be able to, or we are not able to capture, right? I mean, for example, we are currently obviously in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is often labeled as a black swan, no? As it hit most people by surprise, and organizations also hit by surprise. But there were actually warnings and signs out there that this will happen. So it actually is not a black swan. And this happens often in projects also in some other scenarios. So let's say, as an example, a vendor is going out of business and cannot deliver any more critical project deliverable. So this possibly hasn't been on the radar in the risk log, right? It has not been captured as a risk. And accordingly, no measures have been really taken to preventively respond to that threat. So we get hit by this issue by surprise, and we conveniently then label this as a black swan. Yeah, you couldn't have known this. But you know, there possibly would have been related information in news channels, social media, etc. But of course, if such information is not being collected and processed for risk management purposes, then of course it hits the project by surprise. So we need to realize, obviously, that the increasing dynamics in today's world, and also ultimately the business world, that we must take measures actually to be better prepared because of that, of these increasing dynamics. So we need to look actually beyond this boundary of our own human limitations, which definitely will remain, right? So, and that currently blocks us actually from seeing the full range of threats and uncertainties, and that ultimately could impact and derail projects. So of course, the more information we can get about a threat or opportunity, there will be much higher confidence at the end to make that assessment here in terms of probabilities and on that scale here between certainty or impossibility. So here, obviously, the highest confidence exists, as we know, for noun nouns. As I said, there's a certain confidence for this, but for all other conditions, it's rather a matter of judgment. And here we're actually lacking a reasonable amount of information or data to make such judgment. And that results ultimately in uninformed decision making. So the goal here should be really to use technology and analytics to increase that confidence level, to get more insights on those uncertainties and remove this fuzziness, right, of data and information. So basically move all these uncertainties, or this level of uncertainties, move that from the right-hand side here on that picture more to the left-hand side. So in order to do that, we need to ensure two things, right? I mean, first, that all relevant data is actually shared and accessible. So remember, we should remove those data silos. And second, that all information actually is relevant for our assessments and ultimately for our project decisions, that it's being identified and captured and collected. And you know, decisions take place on a daily basis in projects. I mean, for example, we decide on how we assess and react to a certain risk in our rate log, right? I mean, I've just spoken about risks. So that's a perfect example of a decision to be taken. Or how we estimate or prioritize a certain project task in our project plan, another decision. And this is where artificial intelligence can help by collecting the necessary data and information, ultimately towards data-informed decision-making and to make a sound judgment call at the end. So at the beginning of a decision-making process, when we formulate the problem, we have a high uncertainty, high risk, because we do not have really sufficient information, right, to confidently make an assessment there. And then we collect information and assess the different solution options. But currently, we are usually not able to reduce that to a level of comfort or something that gives us enough confidence. Why is that? Because again, right, we are limited. And we may not have, or most likely we have not collected all the relevant information to make a sound judgment, along with the human biases, obviously, which I've mentioned before. So by taking an AI-supported approach for decision-making, where we can take advantage at the end of these strengths that we know of, that AI has, now discover and collect all that relevant information, we significantly can reduce actually that risk of wrong decisions at the end. At the same time, this will, the time factors obviously also playing a role. So at the same time, we will reach decisions much sooner due to the speed of a data analysis that's conducted by AI algorithms. So AI ultimately assists in providing the necessary data and recommends action based on pure facts and data. But one critical element is that decision-making should not be done by the machine alone. Human input, as we know, is still required because there are still relevant factors such as human emotions, intuition, etc., something that AI cannot help us with. So that's why I call this rather a data-informed decision-making, which includes then the human input and ultimately also a human judgment. So that means ultimately that we need to effectively marry those two elements, right? So meaning the fact-based, data-driven and bias-free machine intelligence on one side, and this subjective human assessment on the other, and then forming this way a hybrid intelligence for project management or data-informed project management and data-informed decision-making at the end. So taking advantage of AI capabilities, these strengths that I mentioned, to crawl through massive amounts of data, analyze data, find patterns in different sets of data, determine solution options, make bias-free recommendations, and combine this with our human strengths, which are leadership skills, right? People skills, or as well as intuition. So emotionally driven thinking at the end. And that is an essential point in AI for project management. Machine and human complementing each other and forming this hybrid intelligence, how I call it. And to understand this just a little bit better, let's look at the analytics value chain, as this shows basically how each step provides additional value and improvement to the decision-making process. So we start with an opinion, which usually is highly biased based on gut feeling, and there's no proper argument. And let's take an example. A particular project activity in the software development project, and we need to estimate that one. So let's say that based on limited information or experience, one makes a statement here that, okay, this task will take, I don't know, at least a month of work to complete, right? So we have that. In the second step, we leverage historical project data. So we potentially could identify activities that are close in similarity to that task that we have at hand. In that case, we possibly will find historic project information where a very similar task has been carried out. So we collect that data. Then in the third step, with that data from historical records, we can retrieve metrics, which tell us, for example, in that particular example here, that let's say on average, such task, which is very similar to the task that we are trying to estimate, that took on average 2 weeks to complete by a software developer. So we have narrowed that already further based on retrieved information from historical project information. And in the fourth step, that's the analysis stage, we can then make a differentiation regarding the background of developers that worked actually on this kind of task in the past. And that results in different duration values, because there's senior developers, there are junior developers. So let's say, for example, in this case, we know that the average duration for completion is 2 weeks, but a more senior developer required only 1 week to complete such task, while a junior developer required 3 weeks to complete, let's say. So based on this, decision makers will get insights on certain scenarios. Now that is, in this case, for example, that the senior developer would be able to deliver much faster, but then obviously at a higher cost probably. And if the time factor is more crucial than cost, then assigning a senior developer would be the way to go, let's say, depending obviously on the availability and other factors, right? But the point here is that we're going from a loose statement, which is based to some good portion on gut feel, to a more data-informed analysis, which provides much better insights for decision makers, who then ultimately can make a judgment. And the benefits from such transition are actually significant. I mean, the human bias will be removed when it comes to collecting relevant project information, with AI and machine learning playing out obviously their strengths, right, to deal with that massive amount of data and identifying critical information, and this way contributing to high project planning accuracy. The uncertainty will get reduced significantly, as decisions will be based on relevant data at the end and not only a subset of it. So we actually can capture a much wider spectrum of risks and issues, and this way we can respond better to risks and issues. Efficiency, I mean, so far a lot of time has been spent with identifying and sourcing necessary project information, as I have shown before, but yet information is actually incomplete. Project managers' time, I mean, there's a lot of value in, but it's not really being used properly. So project managers' time will actually get freed up for activities that are more focused on the human strengths, or people management, leadership, these kind of things. And then with a true hybrid approach, projects will become better under control, and project outcomes that can be predicted in a more confident way. So what is the result? Financial savings and ultimately also a competitive advantage, because there's a much better time to market at the end. So, but you can imagine that there are various challenges with the transition to such approach, or such AI-driven project management approach. I mean, at the end, it is certainly revolutionary, and it is nothing that could be implemented quickly, right? So don't make a mistake. AI is not another tool that will just support the project manager and automate a few things here and there. It requires a collaborative approach. It requires a mindset change, and getting there is really not an easy one. And to start with, one of the biggest hurdles is, of course, data. And this particular item, data, I think can be broken down further into three key elements, I think. So data sources, where's that data coming from? Where's information coming from? While this seems to be straightforward, in some cases, in practice, it actually isn't. As a lot of information might not even be properly stored. Maybe that's even offline or highly unstructured information. Like the example of the lessons learned. It's take a picture of a whiteboard, or post-it notes or something like this. We don't even have that in the system properly stored. Data quality, I mean, this is actually a challenging item in many areas already, where data is either incomplete or inaccurate, or it's inconsistent. Data sharing is another item. So one critical element of a data-driven approach is to make data actually available, and this to all parties and all projects at the end. I mean, there is no point in limiting data to one department or project only, like it happens actually, again, lessons learned, right? So you'd not only limit yourself in terms of insights with this and your learnings, but also you would promote inconsistency of information and data. So this is why actually data needs to be shared, really. So next to the challenges related to data, there's obviously other challenges, right? And there's the question of the buy-in. So meaning, how do we actually sell this to the senior management? And it's a very significant change. So how can we actually prove them the benefit and that such change is actually worthwhile? Investment. And what is meant by this is not so much the monetary investment, it's rather the investment in terms of time and effort. So it requires effort, preparation, and ultimately also time to get to a point where you will actually see the real benefits from this approach. Adoption. I mean, how do you get people actually to change and adopt such approach? Again, it is a fundamental change. and some behaviors just need to be thrown overboard. So there are some hurdles, no doubt about this. But on the other hand, now there's a strong need to make a fundamental change, as we have seen already with these consistently low project success rates. But where do we start with such change, right? I mean, clearly, you can imagine the data is certainly at the forefront of all this. And I have mentioned artificial intelligence, machine learning, which certainly will make its entry to project management, right? But to get there, we need to address those hurdles first, right? And those challenges. And the basis for such new approach needs to be established. So I think it's clearly not enough to introduce just big data technology, some fancy algorithms, hire some data scientists and think that, okay, this makes then right now an organization data-driven, data-informed, or data-centric, or whatever you want to call it. Certainly not. I mean, a data culture needs to be established, and that needs to support the data-related work. So investing in a data culture, or project data culture, let's call it, is, in my view, absolutely crucial. And it should be actually the initial step for such journey towards a data-informed decision-making and data-informed project delivery practice. And in my view, establishing an appropriate data culture for project management includes these steps that I've outlined here. So first, lead from the top. I mean, data culture needs to be established top-down. It needs to be an organization-wide approach, and therefore it needs to be supported from the top down, and it needs to be adopted by the entire organization. I mean, only this way we would achieve the full benefit. Data awareness. I mean, this means that data and its value needs to be actually appreciated within the organization. I mean, everyone involved, especially in decision-making processes, where we also have more senior management decision makers maybe in there. So that there's a common understanding and also an engagement from all players. And something that could be done here is to use what we call usually data champions, right? Who could run data awareness workshops to educate decision makers. Data literacy, I mean, what this essentially means is to have the ability to read, write, and comprehend data. So it's like a new language to be learned. So it means that project professionals, ultimately, they need to be skilled up so that they can create, capture, store, and manage project data. And this will lead then to the introduction of a new specialist function, I think, in projects. So we can call that role project data analyst. I've also read about some other terminology, which is like project data strategist. But basically, that role focuses mainly on the identification and the collection and analysis of data for a project in order to generate ultimately the insights for decision making. Data democratization. So this means to share all project data by establishing a central repository for project data, and actually all relevant information or pointers to relevant information that could be useful for all projects in an organization. So we need to remove those data silos that I mentioned before, so that historical project information can actually be used to find patterns and generate ultimately insights for future projects. Data analytics, and we can label this rather project data analytics, I would say. I mean, this should ultimately turn collected data into information and knowledge. So it basically means to draw conclusions from information and turn it into knowledge by applying analytics. So generate those insights that get then ultimately injected into the decision-making process. But to ensure that the project data is properly captured and managed, we need the sound data strategy. And that's a key element to transition to this new project management approach. I mean, as you often hear, data is nowadays a very valuable asset, right, to organizations. And, accordingly, project data also needs to be treated as a highly valuable asset, especially in project-driven organizations. So the aim is to improve the maturity and the quality of project data so that the decision-making in projects can be improved and the project uncertainty ultimately can be decreased. But to achieve that, we need to have actually various questions getting answered. So for example, data availability, I mean, where do we get the data from? Which systems are we using? Are we using Microsoft Project or Excel sheets or any specific or maybe some custom project management tool or other information systems? Is our project data captured in systems? Are there any gaps in how project data is being captured? Again, right? Maybe we have some offline information, which you actually have to digitalize at the end. How can we access the data? Are there any restrictions based on certain policies, any cross-border restrictions or data privacy issues? You know, for example, resource employee information that we want to capture and could be useful. I mean, this could be then a sensitive discussion with HR and legal departments probably in some cases. And such data strategy needs to be tailored to your organization, right? Your data sources and capabilities. And this is one of the fundamental discussions that need to take place, as data is obviously key to this wall approach. So to make use of data analytics, such capability, or project data analytics, let's call it, right, needs to be introduced in the project management space. And there are usually 4 suggested stages to achieve actually a mature analytics capability. So going from some initial descriptive analytics to then prescriptive analytics, which would actually then enable teams to predict the impact of future decisions. And this way determine already upfront an optimal solution for certain problems in projects. And prescriptive capabilities would be the most mature stage, obviously, using predictions based on historical project data to give insights on possible future challenges or opportunities. So it can provide recommendations and find the optimal path forward at the end. And therefore it can help organizations in the decision-making process. So a truly, I mean, such data-informed and analytics and AI-driven approach to project management is, as I said, it's fundamentally different from the traditional approach, right? It requires certainly a significant shift in the project culture, but also in this decision-making culture in a general sense within organizations. So I actually have read about surveys which say that 85% of companies are trying to be more data-driven and make more data-driven decisions, but only 37% have actually been successful with that. And what usually is in the way is the missing adoption of a new decision-making culture. We have to remember, ultimately, it's not only about technology, it's also about cultural and mindset changes. It is certainly an evolutionary process. And you know, clearly at the beginning, it's very clear there will be resistance to move to such approach, right? Or data-informed decision-making approach. So there will be a lack of trust in statistical data and technology, and decision makers will be highly skeptical. And that's why it's important to create the maximum of awareness and transparency regarding how we actually come to certain analytic findings and predictions. And this is what I call data awareness before, right? And it will build trust. And to develop this trust and further, we would do in a second step, do a pilot run in one specific department or business area initially. So a siloed use of the approach for decision makers to learn how they can rely on past data. So making executives ultimately more comfortable with this analytics-driven way of decision-making in project management. And in the third step, we expand this approach across various interlinked departments or business areas. So following a more disciplined decision-making process. And this stage should establish actually the right balance between the usage of the collected data and information, and on the other hand, the knowledge and the management experience. So remember the hybrid intelligence model. I mean, this is where you would test it basically, right? And find the right balance. And once such maturity is reached, we would then scale this approach across the entire organization, with obviously more data being used for decision-making and projects. And this may result then using more advanced AI models for autonomous learning, something which we probably, I think, we could go through to more detail, but that would be a separate session. And last but not least, this approach would have to be continuously reassessed regarding its maturity. I mean, ultimately, it's an evolutionary construct that is driven by technology advances, and there is some technology evolution, obviously. So such approach is certainly very different, right? Again, from the traditional approach, and we know it will disrupt, or it would disrupt and revolutionize the project management industry. But I think it also will change the way of taking decisions in organizations in a more general sense. So it's much broader than we may think. But I think that we have this opportunity to innovate and to advance the way we deliver projects, and ultimately improve also project success rates. And I think, coming back to the current pandemic crisis, I think the current pandemic specifically has shown us how volatile, how uncertain, and how dynamic today's world actually is. And this means that everything is becoming much faster. You know, information is changing faster. So what was true yesterday might be wrong today. And we need to adapt quickly to new circumstances. We need to make quick decisions based on changed information. So for me, COVID-19 is kind of an eye-opener also for the project management industry. And we should see this as an opportunity for a long-needed change, and an opportunity to actually rethink our traditional approach, which clearly, in my view, does not work anymore, as we have seen already with these ongoing low project success rates. So some may think that this needs to be thought through more, and such new approach needs to be proven, and there are a lot of doubts about this. I mean, it certainly does. It certainly needs to be thought through much more and tested, but it starts all with awareness, right? It starts with realizing that a change is actually needed. And I think we can, in that space, we can expect a lot more to happen over the next months and years. So in the area of AI and analytics driven project management, especially because, you know, we urgently need a change in the approach how we run projects. And there is a solution to our problems in project management. There's groundwork to be done, of course, mainly regarding project data, which is obviously key for an AI driven approach in project management. But there is a popular slogan, which I always remember actually, and you probably are familiar with: data is the new oil. And that is certainly true, I think, based on the value it provides already in many business areas. And there are lots of examples, and we are probably all familiar with that. It is, however, important that we do not forget this in the project management space. So we have to start acting on it as well, on this reality, let's say, right? And we have to take data ultimately seriously. All right, thanks a lot for your attention. That was the presentation, the main presentation for today. I hope this was somewhat insightful to you. And as mentioned, this presentation is supposed to kind of set the scene, and various elements certainly would be topics for, say, dedicated sessions in the future. And this is why actually the questionnaire via Mentimeter, right? Where you could state your preference for future sessions or a future deep dive, let's say, right? And if you haven't done that questionnaire yet, I mean, you still could do that right now. And we're happy to collect that and take that into consideration for future sessions. And in the meantime, we would now take some questions that probably have been put into the chat. So I will hand over briefly to you, Nicholas.
Hey, Marcus. I'm just going to go scroll back up. There's a couple questions asked. Let me just go to the top here. So the first one's from Jason. So what are the group's thoughts on whether AI in project management is something that we will support or that will support both predictive and iterative delivery environments. To me, it feels more impactful in predictive models. So I guess it's, I mean, maybe to you, Marcus, I mean, I guess, you know, kind of to start the conversation. I mean, if we think about applying AI in project management.
I see, okay. Predictive, okay. Basically, I think, Jason, you're referring to how that works in like more waterfall or agile environments, and how they actually can be adapted, right? Because there's obviously a difference, right? And I mean, I remember we had some discussion in some other presentation before where we had the same question. So basically, how would that work actually in waterfall, and how would that work in agile? How is that different? I mean, in my view, I think at the end, we have to, especially in this large organization, that what I'm used to, right? If you run it agile or waterfall, at the end of the day, you still want to know when a certain project gets delivered. So obviously, the way to get there, there are certain methodologies. So I don't see much of a difference if it's an agile or a more waterfall way of delivering, because you still have to do prediction. Obviously, the iterative or agile approach that is usually suited for, you know, where we have more complex problems or solutions at the beginning are actually rather unknown, right? And we look at often a change in requirements, etc. But if you think about this, actually it's even more important there, or even more suitable almost, because you have to take decisions much more often and much quicker. So let's say, you know, we predict a project. I mean, we can run this in an iterative approach, but ultimately you want to basically say, okay, when can we actually get this full project getting delivered with such methodology? Then you can run this through such model that I've shown here and predict that. But ultimately, when you get some changes in requirements and you basically are more agile at the end, which changes kind of your direction, then you need some quick, basically, decisions or assessment. What does it mean? What does it mean in terms of timelines overall? What does it mean in terms of risks and issues? What does it mean in terms of any dependencies and so forth, right? So this is usually a process that needs to go fast because we're in agile mode and you want to have that actually quickly delivered, right? So, and that's where basically the crux of it is, right? The decision making needs to become faster, and you have a lot of information that needs to be taken into consideration. And if you have take quick decisions, today, usually what happens is, you just take a snippet of information that you are quickly able to collect. Then maybe on top of it, some intuition, some gut feel, and there's your decision, right? And we try it out, right? And obviously the agile method also promotes basically to fail fast, etc., right? We know all this. But I mean, at the end of the day, you want to deliver a project and you want to deliver it to the business and they want to know, when do I get it, right? And this is basically where at the moment, be it waterfall or agile, we have really a very high uncertainty, and obviously in some projects more than in others. And if we talk agile and what I mentioned before, like more complex problems and solutions are rather unknown, obviously the uncertainty goes way up, right? So here's already where such approach or analytic approach can actually already help, because you actually get to some more certainty a little bit faster. I'm not saying that it resolves the whole thing and just tells you, okay, this is your solution, this is your way to go. You still have obviously a level of uncertainty. There's no way that can be 100% predicted everything, right? But it can help actually to remove that or reduce that complexity or reduce that uncertainty to a certain degree. So summarizing at the end, I don't think that there's that, you know, for such approach that it can be applied only in one or the other. It can be applied in both, but there are obviously certain elements that need to be tailored a little bit different. But at the end, I don't think that one excludes the other, if that answers the question.
And I guess, I mean, Marcus, just to add to it, I think it's, I mean, if you kind of take the approach, I mean, you're talking about methodologies, the questions about methods, I think it applies to, you know, industries as well. I mean, it's not just the technology industry, it's not just the construction industry. I think it's, you know, the fundamental problems lie everywhere, right? I mean, the approach and the application of the technology is slightly different, but I think the benefit is there across the board, right? And just so you guys are aware, I mean, you guys can unmute if you want to, I guess, Jason, or if you
Yeah,
want.
no, that was good. And thanks, Marcus and Nicholas. That answered the question. I totally agree. I think having heard you explain that, Marcus, I think it's a different flavor depending on the environment you're going to use AI in. I think what I wasn't considering and what you prompted me to consider was in the iterative model, you're potentially got a much better chance for the AI to learn during the course of a project, because you are in effect doing some of that logic iteration much quicker than you would in a predictive model where it's just going to look at data and maybe only get data at chunks of time. So in a way, I could see it actually in the agile model being more effective. So no, that was great. Thank you.
That's true, actually. Yeah, good point.
So the next question up is from Ilgan, and maybe, sorry for the pronunciation. The question is, Marcus, so some people in organizations are very reluctant to share, which I can refer of losing their expert status or their competitive advantage amongst colleagues just because, you know, do not want to learn, you know, I guess it's the question, they just don't want to learn new tools. I mean, at the end of the day, what is this incentive for these people to share the information, right? And I guess, Marcus, it kind of comes back to the lessons learned once projects are delivered, or even just documenting the risks, issues appropriately in the systems to provide insight into that for future reuse, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's a give and take, right? I mean, it's not like, okay, I'm not sharing my data because, no, I mean, what do I get back? I mean, you get back other data, right? I mean, it's like, you know, you share your data with other teams or other departments or other project teams, right? They benefit from it, but you actually, you know, you can also benefit from other projects, right? So you actually can improve your own project deliveries, right? And I see a kind of some self-service at the end, which could be established now when you talk about this repositories of data, right? So we have some central repository of data, and basically every project team can go in there and collect data and analyze it and map it basically to a certain project problem or scope, and get insights out of it, right? I mean, how often we actually in decision making, I mean, just think about this, right? How often we actually taking decisions, and we're doing that obviously as project managers on a daily basis, where you think, okay, I mean, I don't know, so just like finger in the air, right? And I think that makes sense because, you know, I'm an experienced project manager, right? But I mean, as I said before, the dynamics today are so fast that, I mean, you have to take decisions fast first, and you need to have informed decisions, right? And that's not taking place today. So if you're lucky, you made the right decisions in many cases, right? In other cases, you're not so lucky. So you need actually more information. So you only can benefit from it. So it's not only providing information, it's also taking information in exchange. And actually, there are already, on another note, when it comes to data sharing and removing those data silos, I mean, there are discussions about not only sharing data within one and the same organization, but actually between organizations, right? I've seen this, there are initiatives more tailored at the moment for construction industry, for example, where they build these data trusts. And so where basically every organization contributes to this data trust and put some data in there and other organizations can learn from it, right? I mean, obviously that's a sensitive topic because, you know, there's some competition going on between organizations, but ultimately it's something that a whole industry, in this case, a project management industry, can actually benefit from. And you see that actually in some organizations, you see that already, how they actually help each other. Like just think about, financial services, the banks, right? I mean, with onboarding processes and using blockchain models, etc., to make this whole thing much faster, the whole onboarding, right? Just as an example, right? I mean, there's always a give and take. So you put something in, you want something back, right? But you can highly benefit from it, and it basically raises your maturity of your project management practice, and ultimately also your competitive advantage and your success actually in the market.
And I guess, I mean, maybe Mark, kind of a word to it. I think what it does as well, I mean, it's, that's one of the reasons for the entire meetup. I mean, it's a grassroots approach at the end of the day, right? I mean, as a project manager, I mean, once we as a practice understand what the benefits are, I think it's going to benefit the entire whole, right? But just going to the next question. So the next question you partially answered, I think, which was a question from Gundula, which was kind of regarding the data input. I wonder where reliable data can be retrieved from on a large scale, especially as companies' project data are usually confidential, right? And I mean, before I hand it over to you, I think, you have these, let's say, enterprise-wide tools like, let's say, in the technology space, Jira, Confluence, et cetera, which can be used. But, Marcus, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of confidentiality, I mean, that's what I kind of, tried to address before, right? Of course, I mean, there's some data like employee data, for example, right? If you, for example, in project, you want to learn with an analytics model how a certain project team member is performing, so you can actually derive from there how a certain task can be estimated in terms of duration, as an example, right? Obviously, that's a sensitive piece of data because you're grabbing basically employee data and want to get some more background on that particular person. So that's what I mentioned, that there are some discussions or some more delicate discussions, let's say, right, with HR and legal departments. But I mean, my personal view is that this certainly at the moment, there will be some restriction here and there. There's no doubt about this. But I mean, we have to see the overall trend, right? I mean, that the data that we have already, if you put this, that we can retrieve already from when we share data, etc., there's already a high benefit, and it just goes into this more and more direction. There more data will come in. At some point, the barriers will fall for some what we call more sensitive data today. So I mean, just think about this. If you think like 20 years back, as an example, right? I mean, who would have thought that we just at some point we go on the internet and give our credit card information away? We just type it in there. We type the number in. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, how can you even do that? I mean, I'm not giving that away. No way, right? So today that's common practice. So you basically, and I'm just thinking about Facebook information, and the world is all open. I mean, that was unbelievable, impossible years back. I mean, even if you would have had this ability back then, nobody would have done that. Think, are you crazy? I'm not putting my information on there. Everybody does that today. So it's a generation thing, right? So the trend is going this way, that we actually open up more and more, right? And at some point, we basically, we'll be kind of almost forced to free up some barriers in terms of data access. Not necessarily like all employee data in that example, but I think we see more and more restrictions falling in terms of data and data access.
I think maybe an interesting point to put out there. I mean, there are companies out there that do kind of benchmarking on for example, I mean, this is more on the technology, but they do benchmarking across industries because they hold data, in AWS or whatever it is that they use, across, for example, the server costs of using AWS for clients, and they basically advise clients, so they don't exchange any information. It's just the benchmarking. They know what the components are, so they remove the point of, let's say, privacy, et cetera, there. But I mean, I think there's technologies and encryption that can apply to it, but it is definitely one of the, there's definitely going to be barriers about data privacy and stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to see how it is, and the trend is like Okay, Marcus, it's going that way. So the next question is from Marco. And it's how can the level of trust and recommendation from AI how can the level of trust and recommendations which AI provides can get improved on project management side? And the second question is, what would be your vision in using AI tools for forming a project team regarding humanity? So I guess the second question is more about creating from the selection of a project team from a, let's say, more from a humane perspective. And the first question is more related to, you know, the trust in the actual recommendations that the AI data, you know, the AI technology is going to be providing to you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay. I mean, that's what I try to depict there with these different stages, right? Where you need to be transparent, right? It's not like you put some tool in there, so it just gets the data and puts out, okay, that's my recommendation, and you should do that. I mean, you need to have some foundation, right? So you need to understand it. You need some background, and that's why I'm saying you need to actually become more data literate, have some more data awareness, and that's basically the fundamental stuff that needs to happen first. So you actually understand how this whole process works, so you can follow this, what AI does, because it does basically this analytic process. It runs it through. So as soon as you understand that basically how that works, then it makes sense to you, and you build that trust. Obviously, at the beginning, you start small. So you run through these different stages of analytics maturity. So you start small and you actually follow this. You do that almost in a manual kind of way before you actually put this more into some advanced AI models later on. So that's why I'm saying it's an evolutionary construct. So it's nothing that will work from day one. It's nothing where you say, I buy a tool that is AI and resolves all my project management issues. I mean, you basically build this up with data, and you have to build up in parallel your understanding of data and your understanding of this whole process and how that works. And that's actually key and so this whole direction goes this way, that data and this data literacy becomes basically a new normal, let's say, in project management. It's not some techie thing. It's that everybody needs to actually become aware of and understand a little bit more. So this is how I see that.
Okay, I'm gonna go up a follow-up comment. I think from Oscar. I think this is actually an interesting one potentially for a future meetup. Kind of, are we going through a case study or an application-oriented example of AI in the project lifecycle? And I think this is, Marcus, maybe food for thought. And I guess for the people that are responding on the Mentimeter, it could be something for the future, for a future meetup, to kind of go through like a component of the project lifecycle in more detail and actually show kind of examples of things that could be delivered or provided. Next question is coming from Bozo. So there's
just want to mention, I mean, we are on the hour right now. We may want to go quickly, since you mentioned it, on future topics. We can maybe briefly look at this at the Mentimeter questionnaire. I mean, I'm sure there are more questions, but we can probably follow up on those separately, or put that basically in the Meetup group.
Yeah.
So let me just look at briefly here at the questionnaire for a few minutes. So what industry? I mean, that's interesting. We're all kind of more in the IT space. Just it takes, okay, it's not going too fast. Okay. So here we see obviously that we are all project managers almost, right? Or a lot of us are project managers. That's quite interesting. I mean, including myself, I'm a program manager, but I think there's the most interest probably. And it's interesting that we have a lot of IT present here in the call. But let me go further. I would be actually interested to see some responses here. Okay, okay, that's actually quite interesting. Yeah, that kind of links to, when I look at the first, I've never heard of AI for project management. It's actually interesting that a lot of people actually haven't heard yet of that, because it is a topic, but I mean, it is a well-discussed topic, but I understand that, AI seems like not really something that you would use in project management because of that more human-driven management approach, let's say, right? It's mainly humanly driven, right? So I understand that. But let me just conscious of time, which we already.
I mean, it is interesting
Sorry?
that kind of like, the things that we discovered at the very beginning, right? That kind of, stifled the entire conversations, right? But, we end up implementing AI or whatever, robots on, business process and stuff like that. But actually the work that we're doing, we don't actually consider, we haven't thought that far, right? Which is interesting.
The biggest challenge, that's of no surprise. I mean, we all deal with higher complexity or increasing complexity. And as I mentioned already before, it's increasingly becoming more volatile, etc. And that is of no surprise. So I fully agree with those survey results here. Oh. How do you see the impact? Okay. Some process automation or chatbots, etc. Yeah, okay. Significant change. Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with the last one. I don't think that AI will eliminate the project manager role. As I've mentioned also in my presentation, it is a collaboration thing, right? And there is a human aspect. You cannot deny it. AI cannot help with that, and that's why you cannot really remove the project manager or the human aspect, let's say, right? So that makes a lot of sense. Okay, give me one more. Okay, highest benefit, monitoring, tracking of project progress. Okay. Yeah, what's interesting also from the previous response is that it goes more in the direction of automation instead of learning. I mean, there's an automation aspect, obviously, but automation, in my view, has always something like, it feels like it's a tool. It's like you buy some more advanced MS Project tool, right? And it it just calculates for you the critical path right away, right? That's how it feels like for me always, which I think in AI, that's not the case, right? It's not some automation tool. There are obviously chatbots, robotics, etc. It falls all into this AI category, but it's more, right? It's about learning and improving. And that's actually something which we probably can go into more detail in some other session. Last but not least, I think it's the last one. Yeah, where do you see potential challenges? Okay, that's there's one more, but okay, that's the potential challenges or blockers. Okay, yeah, there's a lot. Wait and see approach. Okay, lack of management buy-in. Yeah, these are, I think, roughly look like what I also kind of highlighted before in terms of buy-ins, etc. Right? Okay, and here we have a few topics. Interpretation of results. Yeah, okay. We can go through this in detail. I mean, we certainly take this input all, and I mean, again, right, as mentioned, this was kind of some teaser, let's say, right, for this whole topic. That's not the end of it. And we want to deep dive more, and we want to take input that you have given here to actually tailor this to actually what this is all about, and what the most burning questions are, the biggest challenges are. So we actually deep dive there, and I'm really glad that you contributed here with your responses, and it will definitely help us to not only drive this whole approach further, I think, but also to drive our community hopefully a little bit further, so we can yeah, again, give and take, right? I mean, we all have our opinions, we all have our ideas, and contribute there, and we exchange, and this way hopefully we'll build or advance the project management industry, and at least do our contribution, let's say.
I think, you know, Marcus, in you know, follow-up meetup, you know, we can do kind of a condensation of the different suggestions and you know, kind of build a ranking to see what the follow-up sessions would bring. I'm just going to kind of ask you a couple more questions, Marcus, that are in the chat. And I'm going to start from the bottom up here. So in my experience, most projects fail in cause of much pressure from finance that's overruling the requirements of PM on technical and HR side. Please consider that there could be major impact on project success. Looking forward to your next session. I guess, I mean, it's an interesting topic, but I think, you know, if you maybe kind of rephrasing the question, Marcus, if you look at, you know, kind of the two tangible components of project delivery, I think finance and timeline or resources are probably some of them. I mean, where do you think AI can, you know, provide insight on this or support?
I'm just trying to understand that properly. So from finance, it's overruling the requirements. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand that correctly. But you know, there are obviously various factors, right? I mean, finance, yes. Requirements, scope, right? It gets there basically. I mean, if you look at this from a project management point of view, I mean, we all are familiar with a triangle, right? And there are different factors that play a role, right? So all have their weight, and it's yeah, you have to obviously balance this out, right? And that's actually where I think AI can play a significant role, right? Because as I said before, you know, everything has information behind this basically, right? If you see like requirements and everything that sticks behind this, right? Like who actually collected the information, or who is the business, who are the stakeholders who provide this information in terms of requirements. Then finance or budgets, right? It's coming from the whole portfolio management part, right? And it comes from other areas where discussions happen, what we actually prioritize, right? For more yeah, portfolio levels at the end, right? So it's all like balancing this out, right? But basically there's a lot of information that plays a role, so you actually can tailor this to the most efficient way, right? But I would agree that there would be something that we could more deep dive into some future sessions. So it's an interesting point, I would say, to make that more tangible and see how that actually could work from an AI point of view.
I guess, I mean, Marcus, I'm aware that we're a little bit overrunning, but I'm just going to ask you two more questions, and then we can respond on the rest of the question. There's an interesting one here that I just found from Sajufta, and it's going in the direction of what do you think of, or what do you think the benefit is of implementing AI in an earlier stage of project management? And I think this is going back to the question of, you know, in the different phases of project management, where do you think this would be applied, right? And I think, I mean, just gonna add a little bit of an intro on it. I think, I mean, from my perspective, it can be applied through the entire phases, right? It can be coming, you know, from business case to determining the projects, the initiatives, etc. But Marcus, what are your thoughts on this? Where do you think the, you know, the end, let's say the power?
Yeah, I think that that is even, in my view, it should be even start already before even you start a project, before you even have a project manager assigned to a project, because there's decision making already taking place beforehand, right? And one crucial decision is, who is the project manager, right? And you know, if you think about this today, or in many cases, let's say, right, there's a project manager appointed because, I don't know, he's available, or he's a good, he's known to the project sponsor, right, or whoever appoints at the end, right? Or the project manager maybe has a good track record, right, on delivering projects, right, but only with a certain methodology, right? But I mean, it's a crucial decision already before the project even starts. So you appoint a project manager, so that's an important decision, that there's a lot of bias in, there's not a lot of information in, and you basically appoint a project manager, which potentially could basically fail that project. It does not mean that the project manager is bad, or you have a bad selection process. You know, I mean, if you hire one, so it's has a good track record, etc. But there are so many factors today, and with so many dynamics today, and a lot of information that we don't even know of, and that only with analytics we actually can get to it, that would play a role to actually come to a data-informed decision who ultimately should be the project manager in the project. And that applies actually to anyone that you want to assign in a project. So once you have a project manager, then okay, you need to get a team together, right? And then it's the same thing, right? There are a lot of decisions to be taken to get the project off the ground. And it starts also with what the scope is, right? What actually is the project goals ultimately, right? Who are the stakeholders, etc. These are all decisions where AI can play a significant role and help actually to, yeah, as I said, to come to data-informed decisions. So to answer that question, it's at the very beginning, or even beforehand, even before you even start a project.
Okay, perfect. Last question. And it's kind of coming more from a statement, but I mean, project data generally is unstructured, right? And I guess this is more of a technical question, but from a technology perspective, are we at a stage where we can use the unstructured data to actually produce, the recommendations that, from an AI perspective? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that will be a very important point. As I said before, I mean, there's, for example, you want to capture like risks, for example, to vendors, right? Where do you get that information from? You definitely don't have that in a structured format in your database, right? That example that I mentioned during the presentation, when a vendor actually potentially goes bankrupt or something. And actually myself, I had such case out of my own experience. I was working with a vendor, and there was an issue with the vendor, which was actually out there in the media. It was on news channels, I mean, specific news channels, and it was on Twitter and so forth, right? So this is all unstructured data. So AI will actually help to collect that data and actually advise you, you know what, here you have a risk on your vendor who should actually deliver something to you, I don't know, next week or something. And that vendor is going out of business. So you have some problem. So how do we know? If we just look with this view just on our own information and just by accident maybe come across such information. So there's a lot of unstructured information out there that AI can actually capture, for example, from social media. That's one example, right? And that obviously is also related to emails, for example, right? So you can actually get our emails, which is all unstructured data. You can get some information out there. So AI can actually advise you on certain risks or issues that actually gathers from emails. Obviously, these are advanced models to actually capture this properly. It needs to be trained properly, right? But I mean, for example, that use case that I mentioned before with a vendor, that's actually information that you could more or less easily capture already, and it would be helpful potentially for your particular project.
I guess, I mean, given the time, we're 15 minutes over already, but I guess thanks, Marcus, for the interesting comments and presentation. I guess the rest of the questions we never got to, we will work on providing feedback either through the Meetup group or something like that, and take some of the questions probably up in the follow-up sessions. Yeah, I don't know. Marcus, anything else to say?
No, but again, right, thank you everyone for attending. Again, I didn't really expect that huge response to our Meetup group and this event, but it's great. And I hope that we can grow this. And again, what's key obviously is collaboration, and yeah, that we get some input and feedback from your end. And again, right, you have done that already here with the questionnaire to start with. So that's great, and I hope we can grow this community, and I hope to see you again in the next session, and we'll certainly take these suggestions here that we have here on the screen, take into consideration for future topics. So thanks a lot, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, guys, and enjoy your Thursday evenings.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.